Prince Andrew loses his military honours and royal patronages and will no longer use the title His Royal Highness in any official capacity. It follows the news from New York yesterday that the civil case for sexual abuse against the prince will go ahead. A former Syrian colonel is found guilty of the torture of thousands of people at a notorious prison in Damascus during Syria's civil war. The Russian ambassador to the UK tells the BBC it is not their current intention to invade Ukraine. And British ministers rally around Boris Johnson with varying degrees of support as he faces increasing calls to quit for attending a drinks party during the first lockdown in 2020.
In France, the European Union's top diplomat, Josep Borrell, warns that aggression against Ukraine would result in severe costs for Russia. China says punishments announced by the U.S. that target one group and 7 people linked to North Korea's weapons programs are unhelpful. 4 of 5 affected North Koreans are based in China. The World Health Organization says COVID-19 has infected 10 million Africans and caused 230,000 deaths there. And Americans are paying more for many goods as inflation increased 7% from last year. That is the biggest rise in 40 years.
Hello and welcome to this edition of NHK Newsline. I'm Raja Pradhan with the news from Tokyo. We start with the coronavirus situation here in Japan, where the government is revising rules to deal with the rapid spread of the Omicron variant. More than 18,000 coronavirus infections were confirmed on Thursday. The daily tally is more than 4 times the figure from a week ago. 125 people across Japan are in serious condition, up 20 from Wednesday. Tokyo reported more than 3,000 new cases. The number increased by about 1,000 for 2 days in a row. Health experts monitoring the situation say the daily tally in the capital is expected to exceed 10,000 by the end of January.
A rapid spread of infections would raise the risk of all Tokyo residents, including medical workers and essential workers, contracting the virus or coming in close contact with an infected person. That could force us to suspend our social activities.
The governor plans to ask the central government to give Tokyo authority to take stricter antivirus measures if its medical system becomes strained.
We will consider asking the government to apply intensive anti-infection measures if 20% of hospital beds are occupied. If the rate rises to 50%, we will consider asking the government to declare a state of emergency.
Experts are calling on the government to change the rules so people who've been in close contact with an infected person can resume their activities sooner. Currently, they're asked to isolate for 14 days. The experts say the period should be shortened to 10 days and even shorter for pressing cases such as medical workers. An oral COVID-19 drug developed by U.S. pharmaceutical firm Merck was approved in Japan last month. It's now available at clinics and pharmacies across the nation. It's administered to patients with mild symptoms isolating at home based on a doctor's prescription.
Since we can order a limited amount at one time, we might face a shortage if patients keep on increasing.
The government is speeding up its rollout of booster shots, shortening the necessary interval between the second and third jabs. Health Ministry officials are also preparing to approve the use of the Pfizer vaccine for children aged 5 to 11. Currently, children below 12 are not eligible for inoculation. Turning now to the Beijing Winter Olympics and Paralympics, which kick off in a few weeks' time. Their organizers have highlighted their efforts to make them eco-friendly. Officials with the Beijing Organizing Committee said venues are powered by renewable energy, and they said they're adopting clean energy vehicles such as hydrogen-fueled buses. They stressed the games will be carbon neutral. Chinese authorities are on alert against the spread of the Omicron variant. Places with confirmed Omicron infections include Tianjin, which neighbors Beijing. The cases are believed to have resulted from community transmission. The city of Xi'an in Shanxi province is under a strict lockdown. The organizing committee has yet to announce how tickets will be sold to residents of mainland China. The Beijing Olympics begin on February 4th. A South Korean official says President Moon Jae-in likely will not attend next month's Beijing Olympics. The source within the president's office said South Korea hopes the games will support peace and improve inter-Korean relations. The official said the Moon administration is considering sending a delegation, but not the president himself. Several nations have joined a U.S.-led diplomatic boycott of the games, but Moon said as recently as last month, South Korea will not be part of it. The world's #1 tennis player, Novak Djokovic, has been included in a draw for the Australian Open. But it's not clear if he can play for a 10th title, as the government is considering whether to revoke his visa again. Djokovic is a top-seeded defending champion. He's been drawn to play a fellow Serb, Miomir Kecmanovic, for his first-round match next week. Djokovic was denied entry into Australia last week. Border officials ruled he did not meet their criteria to be exempted from being vaccinated against COVID-19. On Monday, a court overturned the visa cancellation on the grounds that immigration officials had failed to follow proper procedures. But the judge did not address whether Djokovic's vaccine exemption was valid. Djokovic asserted he was exempt as he had COVID-19 last month. But it's still not clear whether Djokovic will be able to play in the Australian Open. The documents he submitted before he entered the country were found to contain false information. He later admitted and apologized for what he called a human error. The Australian government said providing false information on the form could lead to visa cancellation. Members of the only parachute unit in Japan's self-defense forces have shown off some of their training. They gave the media access to a drill in which they took back a remote island. The ground self-defense forces 1st Airborne Brigade has about 2,000 members. They've been training near Tokyo. They parachuted from Japanese and U.S. aircraft at an altitude of 340 meters. Their scenario was to take back a remote island. Once they had landed, they retook facilities with support from helicopters. Then they checked the procedures for deploying units that have surface-to-ship missiles. The Japanese self-defense forces are beefing up their ability to defend remote islands. They've done some of their training with troops from the United States. This comes as China is increasingly active at sea. 2 foreigners who were detained for over 1,000 days after applying for refugee status are suing the Japanese government. 2 years ago, a UN body called the long-term detention arbitrary. Haydar Safari Diman from Iran and a Turkish man who prefers to be called Deniz filed the lawsuit. The men said they applied for refugee status more than 10 years ago because of persecution in their home countries. After their requests were turned down, they went back and forth from being granted provisional release and being sent to a detention center. The two say they suffered mental stress from their detention. They're seeking more than $260,000 in damages.
I trust Japan's judicial system, and I hope it will make the right decision. I want them to protect the human rights of foreign nationals, including ourselves.
In 2020, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention adopted an opinion urging the Japanese government to review its handling of the foreign nationals. The opinion is not legally binding, but last year, the government filed an objection arguing the detentions were properly implemented in accordance with the law. It said the opinion was based on factual errors. Immigration officials say they'll respond to the lawsuit after they receive the documents. Moving now to Thailand, where authorities are planning to introduce an entry fee for foreign tourists as it tries to revive its battered tourism industry. A government spokesperson said on Wednesday the country is considering collecting about $9 from each foreign tourist starting in April. The funds will be used to cover travel insurance and improve tourist attractions. Officials say they hope to lure up to 15 million visitors and generate at least $24 billion this year. But the plan is an untimely one for some tourist operators. The Association of Thai Travel Agents said the fee could further hamper confidence in travel and alienate visitors, especially those who come in large groups. Thailand was gradually lifting mandatory quarantines for tourists from November. But the requirement was reimposed last month in the face of the fast-spreading Omicron variant. Authorities reported over 8,000 new coronavirus cases on Thursday, jumping from about 3,000 at the beginning of January. Indonesia's government has allowed a conditional resumption of coal exports following an improvement in the supply situation for domestic power plants. The world's top coal exporting country had imposed a temporary ban on January 1st. The government announced it would allow 37 ships loaded with coal to leave its ports. It also said the export ban had been lifted for coal producers who have contracts with the state power company. The contracts required them to supply at least 25% of their annual output to domestic power plants last year. The export ban was introduced to resolve the problem of coal shortages at power plants due to the lower prices of fuel for domestic use. The government explained the situation has now improved. The International Energy Agency says Indonesia was the world's largest coal exporter in 2020, with 31.5% of the total. This year's first Grand Sumo tournament is underway here in Tokyo. NHK World's resident sumo expert Morita Hiroshi has an update on the competition.
Happy New Year, sumo fans! And yes, the New Year tournament is off to another exciting start as Yokozuna Grand Champion Terunofuji is looking as sharp as ever. The lone Yokozuna Terunofuji is gunning for a three-peat. They lock up. Terunofuji gets his lethal weapon, the left-hand outside grip, and dispatches Ichinojo with a strong overarm throw. Terunofuji has now extended his winning streak to 23. Besides Terunofuji, 4 other combatants entered Day 5 unscathed. Among them, Mitakeumi and Abi are looking particularly good with their dominating performances. Mitakeumi has his sights set on earning a promotion to the second highest Ozeki rank. Kiribayama thrusts hard. Mitakeumi takes a few licks, but he keeps his cool and pushes Kiribayama out. Mitakeumi remains perfect after 5 days. Abi is hoping to prove that his spectacular outing in the previous contest was no fluke. Abi comes out with all guns blazing and shoves Hokutofuji out without breaking a sweat. Abi advances to 5-0. All right, here are the wrestlers at the top of the leaderboard after 5 days. Terunofuji, Mitakeumi, and Abi are leading the way, each with 5 wins and no losses. And that's a wrap for today's Sumo Sum Up. I'll be back to give you a much closer look at the championship race next week, so see you then.
Next, residents of southern Brazil are seeing a mixed bag of weather conditions. While some areas are dealing with drought, others were hit by deadly floods. Our meteorologist Jonathan O explains the situation in our World Weather Report.
Hello, we're talking about a tale of 2 different weather patterns in the same general region of Brazil. Down toward the south, we are seeing the rain for the southeastern areas, but then down further toward the west in the southern areas, we're talking about really dry weather. In fact, let me show you some video to give you an idea of the situation as soybean farmers in southern Brazil are contending with continued drought that is expected to wipe out up to 90% of their harvest. The last time the area saw rain was late October. In contrast, those in southeastern Brazil are dealing with too much rain as it persisted for 2 weeks, causing dams to overflow. More than 20 people have been killed due to flooding, and many homes have been inundated by muddy waters. And look, the story continues. We are talking about more rain expected for Rio de Janeiro going forward as we go throughout the next 24 hours, at least near there. I think the actual city may be dealing more of a drier pattern, but that general region looking at rain, Brasilia looking at rain and thunderstorms, a high of 28 coming up on Friday. And look at the heat down here, 42 degrees in Buenos Aires. This hot weather pattern will be continuing as we go forward in time. So this is going to be some concern for those living in the southern areas of the continent because it's been a big heat wave. Meanwhile, keep an eye on what's happening here in the Pacific Northwest. Another wave moving through and bringing some significant amounts of wet weather, with snow likely developing up into the mountains as this low pushes toward the east. And we'll watch this low as it pushes eastward, because we may be talking about some winter development and winter weather development for the areas toward the east as we go into the weekend. So be on the lookout for that. More rain into Vancouver with a high of 8 coming up on Friday. Still talking about some snow into the northern areas of Japan as we have a low moving through, and along the Sea of Japan side of the country looking at some more snow. High pressure back toward the west, keeping things relatively dry, but cold air coming in ahead of it. So we're looking at some chilly temperatures as we go into Friday. Hope you have a good day wherever you are.